I never thought that kindness could be a curse. That's what my grandmother used to say as she braided my pale blonde hair by candlelight, her wrinkled fingers moving with practiced precision. "Eleanor," she'd whisper, "in this world, the kindest hearts often suffer the deepest wounds." Back then, I thought she was trying to harden me. Now I understand she was trying to prepare me. The northern wind howled outside my small cottage, carrying the scent of pine and winter's promise. Autumn was fading fast this year, and with it, the fragile security I'd built for myself at the edge of Blackthorn Village. I pulled my worn shawl tighter around my shoulders, trying to focus on the herbs drying from the ceiling beams instead of the growing unease in my stomach. Tomorrow was the harvest offering, the annual tribute our village paid to the creatures of the Shadowvale Forest, the ritual that kept us safe, or so the elders claimed. Each year, 5 families were chosen to present gifts at the ancient stone altar deep within the woods. This year, my name had been drawn. An honor, Elder Morris had announced, his eyes never quite meeting mine. But I knew better. Being chosen for the offering wasn't an honor. It was a calculated risk. Send those who wouldn't be missed too deeply if they never returned. I touched the silver pendant hanging at my throat, my grandmother's final gift before illness took her last winter. The wolf's head with amber eyes seemed to watch me, a constant reminder of her final words. Trust what your heart sees, not what your eyes tell you. A sharp knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting visitors, especially not with nightfall approaching. In Blackthorn, no one ventured out after sunset, not if they wanted to live. "Eleanor?" A familiar voice called. Marjorie, the baker's wife, with her perpetual smell of yeast and kindness that rarely extended beyond her immediate circle. I opened the door to find her clutching a small basket, her round face pinched with something that might have been concern but looked suspiciously like pity. "I brought you some bread for tomorrow," she said, pushing the basket into my hands before I could respond. "And some dried meat. The journey to the altar takes most of the day." "Thank you," I replied, knowing the gesture wasn't entirely selfless. The village took care of offering participants, not out of compassion but superstition. Bad luck would follow anyone who didn't aid the chosen. "They say the moon will be almost full tomorrow night," Marjorie continued, lowering her voice. "You know what that means." I did. The creatures of Shadowvale were said to be stronger under the waxing moon, more likely to appear at the offering, more likely to judge whether our gifts were worthy. "I'll be careful," I promised, though we both knew carefulness had little to do with survival in the forest. After Marjorie left, I sat by my small hearth, sorting through the herbs I would bring as my offering. Valerian root for peace, lavender for protection, rosemary for remembrance, simple gifts from a simple healer. Probably insufficient in the grand scheme of things, but they were all I had to give. Sleep evaded me that night, chased away by howls that seemed closer than usual. By morning, my eyes burned with exhaustion, and my hands trembled slightly as I packed my basket and donned my sturdiest boots. The other 4 chosen ones waited at the village square. Thomas the blacksmith with his ironwork, Ruth with her fine embroidery, Owen carrying smoked meats, and Sarah with jugs of mead. All valuable offerings, all from people the village could replace. "Remember," Elder Morris intoned, his staff striking the cobblestones for emphasis. "Place your offerings on the altar before sunset. Speak the words of gratitude, and whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not look back once you've turned away. The path will lead you home, if the forest deems you worthy." The journey began in tense silence. As we ventured deeper into Shadowvale, the trees grew taller, their canopies blocking out much of the daylight. Moss-covered stones marked our path, ancient runes carved into their surfaces glowing faintly with a light I'd learned not to question. By midday, Ruth was quietly weeping, and Owen's face had turned the color of curdled milk. Only Thomas maintained a stoic expression, though the white-knuckled grip on his pack betrayed his fear. "We should rest," I suggested when we reached a small clearing. "Save our strength for the final approach." "The altar isn't far now," Thomas replied, pointing to where the path narrowed ahead. "I can almost feel it." He was right. There was a heaviness in the air, a pressure that hadn't been there before. The forest had gone eerily silent. No birdsong, No rustling leaves, just the sound of our breathing and footsteps. We continued onward, each step more difficult than the last, as though the forest itself resisted our intrusion. Then suddenly, the trees parted, revealing the ancient stone altar in a perfectly circular clearing. The altar stood 8 feet tall, a monolith of black stone veined with silver. Offerings from past years lay scattered around its base, remnants of iron crafts now rusted, fragments of pottery, withered plant matter, a testament to those who had come before us. Before sunset, Thomas reminded us, glancing nervously at the sky visible through the clearing, the sun was already beginning its descent. One by one, they placed their offerings on the altar, speaking the traditional words of gratitude with trembling voices. When my turn came, I laid my carefully bundled herbs on the cold stone. For protection and healing, I whispered, freely given in respect and hope for harmony. As I stepped back, joining the others who waited at the edge of the clearing, a sound broke the silence, metal scraping against stone, coming from somewhere behind the altar. "We should go," Owen hissed, already turning toward the path. "Now," but something held me in place, that sound. It wasn't part of the forest. It was too deliberate, too pained. Through a gap in the stones, I caught a glimpse of movement. "Wait," I said, even as the others began their retreat. I think something's there." "Eleanor, don't." Sarah grabbed my arm. "Whatever it is, it's not our concern. The offering is complete." But my grandmother's pendant seemed to burn against my skin, and her words echoed in my mind. "Trust what your heart sees." "Go," I told them, pulling free. "I'll catch up." Their relief was palpable as they hurried away, not once looking back. "Cowards," a small voice inside me whispered, but I couldn't blame them. Fear ruled this place, had ruled our village for generations. Once alone, I circled the altar cautiously. The scraping sound came again, followed by a low growl that raised the hair on my arms. Behind the altar, partially hidden by fallen stones and overgrowth, lay a massive wolf. Its fur was silver gray, matted with dirt, and what looked disturbingly like dried blood. Heavy iron chains bound its muscular body to a spike driven deep into the earth. The wolf's eyes, amber like the stones in my pendant, fixed on me with an intelligence that stole my breath. There was pain there, yes, but also a rage so profound it seemed to radiate heat. Every instinct screamed for me to run. This was no ordinary wolf. It was far too large, its presence too commanding. This was one of them. The creatures that ruled Shadowvale, that accepted our offerings in exchange for allowing our village to exist. The wolf growled again, lips curling back to reveal teeth designed for tearing flesh. But it didn't lunge, couldn't with those chains restricting its movement. Someone had trapped it here, left it to die slowly. The thought filled me with unexpected anger. Whatever this creature was, such cruelty seemed unconscionable. "I won't hurt you," I said softly, knowing it couldn't understand but hoping my tone might convey my intention. I set my basket down and slowly withdrew my small herb knife. The wolf's growl deepened, its body tensing as it watched the blade. "This isn't right," I continued, more to steady myself than for the wolf's benefit. "No one deserves to suffer like this." I approached cautiously, knife extended. The chains were thick, but old, the links rusted where they connected. If I could just pry one open enough? The wolf snapped at me, missing by inches. I jumped back, heart pounding wildly against my ribs. "I'm trying to help you," I said, frustration leaking into my voice. "Please." Those intelligent eyes studied me, and something shifted in their amber depths. The wolf went still, watching as I approached again. This time it didn't snap, though a continuous low growl rumbled from its chest. The sun was sinking rapidly now, shadows lengthening across the clearing. I worked frantically at the weakest chain link, my knife handle digging painfully into my palm. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool air. Just as the final rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, the link snapped open. The chain fell away with a heavy clank. The wolf remained motionless for one heartbeat, then another. Then it rose to its full height, massive and terrifying in the gathering darkness. I scrambled backward, dropping my knife, certain I'd made a fatal mistake. But instead of attacking, the wolf threw back its head and howled, a sound so primal and powerful that it seemed to shake the very ground beneath us. The air around the wolf began to shimmer, like heat rising from summer stones. I should have run. I know that now. Instead, I stood transfixed as the wolf's form blurred and stretched, its howl transforming into something almost human. Where the wolf had stood moments before, a man now knelt, tall and powerfully built, with the same silver-gray hair falling past broad shoulders, and those same amber eyes that held mine with unnerving intensity. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, somehow enhancing rather than diminishing his savage beauty. He wore only torn, dark trousers, his chest bare and muscled, marked with the same wounds I'd seen on the wolf. The broken chains lay at his feet. "You," he said, his voice deep and rough, as though unused to human speech. "You freed me." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The stories were true. The creatures could take human form. He stood, towering over me, his expression unreadable in the deepening twilight. Then, with movement too swift to follow, he closed the distance between us. One large hand cupped my face, surprisingly gentle despite the calluses I could feel against my skin. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone as he studied me with those inhuman eyes. "What is your name?" he demanded. "Eleanor," I whispered, finding my voice at last. His lips curved into what might have been a smile, revealing teeth still too sharp to be fully human. "Eleanor," he repeated as though testing the sound of it. "Do you know what you've done?" I shook my head slightly, afraid to break the strange spell that kept me rooted in place. "You've freed the Alpha King of Shadowvale," he said, "and by the ancient laws, I now claim you as my bride." The forest went utterly still at his proclamation. No wind rustled the leaves, no creatures stirred in the underbrush. It was as if Shadowvale itself held its breath, waiting for my response. "Your bride?" The words felt foreign on my tongue, disconnected from reality. "I don't understand." His hand dropped from my face, but he remained close. Too close. His scent filling my nostrils. Wild and earthy, like pine needles after rain, and something deeper, more primal. Something that made my heart race with instinctive warning. "The one who breaks the chains becomes bound by them," he said, as though reciting an ancient truth. "A life for a life, a bond for a bond. That's not—" "I was just being kind," I stammered, taking a small step backward. "I didn't agree to anything." Something dangerous flashed in his amber eyes. "Kind?" He tested the word like it was unfamiliar. "You humans have curious notions. Was it kindness that left me chained at your altar? Was it kindness that brought you to these woods with offerings to appease what you fear?" Shame heated my cheeks because he wasn't wrong. Our village had participated in the harvest offering for generations, never questioning what we were truly paying homage to, or why. "I didn't chain you," I said quietly but firmly, "and I don't know who did." He circled me slowly, studying me from every angle. I forced myself to stand straight, to meet his gaze whenever it found mine, though every instinct screamed to run. "No," he finally conceded. "You didn't. But your people have much to answer for." The last rays of light had vanished completely now, leaving us in darkness broken only by shafts of pale moonlight filtering through the trees. The waxing moon illuminated his features in silver and shadow, highlighting the inhuman angles of his face. "I need to return to my village," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They'll be wondering where I am." His laugh was harsh and without humor. "Your companions fled without looking back. Your village sent you as tribute, little healer." He gestured to my fallen basket of herbs. "They won't be searching for you tonight, or ever." Ice formed in my veins as the truth of his words sank in. The other 4 had left me. By now, they would have reached Blackthorn, perhaps already sharing the tale of my foolish decision to linger at the altar. By custom, no one would come looking. It was forbidden to return to the forest after an offering until the next year's cycle. I was alone with him, the Alpha King of Shadowvale. "What's your name?" I asked, needing something, anything to ground myself in this impossible situation. He seemed surprised by the question, his head tilting slightly in a gesture eerily reminiscent of his wolf form. "Names have power," he said after a moment, "but you may call me Dominic." "Dominic," I repeated, the name unexpectedly human for a creature of legend. "If you're going to—" I hesitated, unable to say "kill me" aloud, as if speaking it might make it real. "I'd at least like to know why I was chosen for the offering." "Chosen?" Dominic's expression darkened. "Your village doesn't choose. They sacrifice. The weakest, the outsiders, those they believe won't be missed." He stepped closer again, inhaling deeply near my hair. "Those who are different." My hand instinctively went to my pendant, fingers wrapping around the small wolf's head for comfort. Dominic's eyes followed the movement, narrowing when he saw what I clutched. With speed that left me gasping, his hand captured mine, pulling the pendant forward to examine it. "Where did you get this?" His voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "My grandmother. It was hers," I said, pulse pounding in my throat where his fingers brushed against my skin. "A family heirloom." "Family," he repeated, his expression unreadable. He released the pendant, but not my hand. "Come. These woods aren't safe after nightfall, not even for me in my current state." He tugged gently but insistently, leaving me little choice but to follow as he led me away from the altar and deeper into Shadow Vale. I glanced back once at my fallen knife and basket, the only connections to my old life, before the darkness swallowed them from view. We walked in silence, Dominic moving with fluid grace despite his injuries, his hand warm around mine. The forest that had seemed so threatening before now parted before him, branches shifting away from our path, roots flattening beneath our feet. I lost track of time and direction, focusing only on placing one foot before the other, on breathing through the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. When Dominic finally stopped, we stood before a massive oak tree with a trunk wider than 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder. He placed his free hand against the bark and murmured words in a language I didn't recognize, guttural, yet musical, ancient-sounding. The tree shuddered, and a seam appeared in its trunk, widening into an archway that revealed stone steps descending into warm, golden light. "The entrance to your kingdom?" I asked, finding my voice again. "One of many," he replied. "The boundaries between realms are thinner in Shadow Vale. This leads to sanctuary." He gestured for me to precede him down the steps. I hesitated, every childhood warning about following mysterious strangers into unknown places screaming in my mind. But what choice did I have? Return alone through the deadly nighttime forest? Attempt to find my way back to a village that had essentially sacrificed me? Drawing a deep breath, I stepped through the archway and began my descent. The stone steps spiraled downward, illuminated by glowing moss that clung to the walls. The air grew warmer, carrying scents of cedar and something sweeter, like honey and spice. After what felt like hundreds of steps, we emerged into a vast underground cavern that stole what remained of my breath. Crystal formations jutted from the ceiling and floor, catching and refracting light from braziers mounted on intricately carved stone columns. A small waterfall cascaded down one wall into a pool that gleamed like liquid silver. Woven rugs in rich reds and golds covered portions of the smooth stone floor, and cushioned seating areas were arranged near a central fire pit. It was beautiful, otherworldly, and clearly lived in. Books and scrolls lay scattered on a low table. Weapons hung on one wall beside what appeared to be maps. A partially eaten meal sat abandoned on a side table. "You live here?" I asked, turning slowly to take it all in. "When necessary," Dominic replied, moving past me to rummage through a wooden chest. He withdrew a dark tunic and pulled it over his head, wincing slightly as the fabric touched his wounds. "It serves as a way station between territories." "You're hurt," I said, noticing the fresh blood now staining the tunic. Healer's instincts temporarily overrode my fear. "Those injuries need attention." He glanced at me with something like surprise. "They will heal. My kind recovers quickly." "Not from iron poisoning," I countered, remembering the rusted chains. "Those wounds were made by iron, weren't they?" "That's why they haven't closed yet." A reluctant respect flickered across his features. "You know our weaknesses. I'm a healer. I know about wounds and poisons." I glanced around the cavern. Do you have herbs here? Clean water? Bandages? Dominic studied me for a long moment, his expression guarded. Then he gestured toward the pool. The water is pure. There are supplies in that cabinet. I approached the cabinet cautiously, half expecting it to be filled with bones or other grisly trophies. Instead, I found neatly organized herbs, many familiar, some I'd never seen before, along with clean linen strips and clay jars of salves. Setting my fear aside, I gathered what I needed and returned to where Dominic had seated himself by the fire. He watched me with those unnerving amber eyes as I arranged my supplies. You'll need to remove your tunic, I instructed, falling back on the professional tone I used with all my patients in the village. His lips curved in a slight smile, but he complied, revealing the full extent of his injuries. Deep lacerations crossed his chest and arms where the chains had cut into his flesh. The wounds were angry and inflamed, the surrounding skin bearing the telltale blackened veins of iron poisoning. How long were you chained there? I asked, dipping linen into the water. 3 days, he replied, his voice tight as I began cleaning the first wound. They came during the new moon, when my powers are weakest, used silver weapons to subdue me, iron to bind me. They? Who would dare chain the Alpha King? His expression darkened. Those who seek what isn't theirs to take. Power. Territory. He hissed as I applied a poultice of yarrow and comfrey to a particularly deep wound. Dominion over the human lands. I worked in silence for a while, my fingers moving with practiced efficiency, despite the strangeness of my patient. Up close, I could see the differences that marked him as other than human. The unusual amber hue of his eyes with their vertical pupils that expanded and contracted as I worked, the slightly elongated canines, the way his muscles moved beneath skin that seemed too smooth, too flawless apart from his scars and wounds. "Why did you help me?" he asked suddenly. "You must have known I wasn't an ordinary wolf." I considered the question as I wrapped a bandage around his forearm. My grandmother used to say that cruelty is a choice, not a necessity. Whatever you are, you didn't deserve to suffer like that. Even knowing what I am, what I could do to you and your kind. I met his gaze directly. What are you exactly? You have no stories in your village? No legends of the creatures that rule Shadowvale? We're told not to speak of it directly, I admitted. There are tales of shapeshifters, beings who walk as men but carry the spirit of beasts. The elders call you the shadow kind. Shifters, he nodded. Wolf kind, mostly, in these territories. There are others elsewhere. Bear, eagle, great cats. We are the first children of this land, born of its wild magic. Your kind came later, smaller and weaker but clever, numerous. And now we fear you, I finished, securing the last bandage. Send offerings to appease you. Fear is a useful tool for maintaining boundaries, Dominic said, his tone matter-of-fact. Your village exists because my pack allows it. The reminder of the power imbalance between our kinds sent a fresh wave of unease through me. I began gathering the used supplies, needing distance from his intensity. And now? I asked, my back to him as I returned items to the cabinet. What happens to me? You said something about claiming me. The words stuck in my throat. I heard him rise, felt his presence behind me before his voice came, closer than expected. By our most ancient laws, one who saves a royal life is owed a life debt. One who frees a royal from bonds may claim a bond in return, or be claimed. His hand touched my shoulder lightly. You freed me. I claimed you. I turned to face him, forcing myself not to step back despite our proximity. As your prisoner? As my mate, he corrected, his expression solemn. My equal in the eyes of the pack. I'm human, I reminded him, as if he could have somehow forgotten this obvious fact. Yes. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Which makes this complicated. Complicated? I echoed, incredulity rising. It's impossible. I have a life, a home, a village that sent you as sacrifice. He interrupted, his voice hardening. They won't welcome you back, Eleanor. Even if you returned, you'd be marked by your time in Shadowvale. They would fear you, shun you, or worse. The truth of his words hit me with physical force. I'd seen how the village treated those who defied tradition, or seemed too closely aligned with the old ways. My own grandmother had been barely tolerated, her healing skills the only thing keeping her from outright exile. What choice do I have, then? I whispered, hating the defeat in my voice. Dominic's expression softened unexpectedly. One hand came up to tuck a strand of pale hair behind my ear, the gesture startlingly gentle from such a dangerous being. You chose to free me when all logic should have told you to run, he said quietly. Perhaps there are more choices ahead than either of us can see now. A distant howl broke the moment, followed by another, then several more joining in chorus. Dominic's head snapped up, his body tensing. My pack, he said, moving quickly to gather weapons from the wall. They're calling. Something's wrong. Are they in danger? I asked, alarmed by his sudden urgency. He strapped a wicked-looking blade to his hip, his movements economical and practiced. They shouldn't be searching for me here in this section of the territory, not unless... He broke off, head tilting as though listening to something I couldn't hear. Unless what? His amber eyes found mine, suddenly cold with deadly purpose. Unless the ones who chained me have returned. Stay here. This place is warded and safe. Before I could protest, he strode toward the cavern entrance, pausing only briefly to look back at me. Remember, Eleanor, you bear my claim now. That marks you as under my protection, but also makes you a target for my enemies. With those ominous words hanging in the air between us, Dominic disappeared up the stone steps, leaving me alone in the strange underground sanctuary, listening to the distant howls growing more frantic by the moment. I lasted perhaps 10 minutes alone in that beautiful alien cavern before the walls began to close in around me. Dominic's warning echoed in my mind. Stay here. It's safe. But so did the howls that had summoned him away. Something was wrong in Shadowvale. Something connected to whoever had left him chained and dying at our village altar. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant again, tracing the wolf's head. The amber eyes that now reminded me so vividly of Dominic's. Had she known? All those years of strange warnings, cryptic lessons about the forest, insistence that I learn every herb that could heal or harm. Had she known what dwelled in Shadowvale more intimately than she ever admitted? The thought propelled me toward the stone steps. I wasn't foolish enough to venture out into a forest I didn't know at night, with dangerous creatures potentially hunting, but I could at least ascend to the entrance, perhaps hear what was happening. The stairs spiraled upward, the glowing moss providing just enough light to prevent a fall. When I reached the top, I hesitated at the archway, peering out into the night. The massive oak still stood sentinel, but beyond it, flickers of movement disturbed the forest shadows. The howls had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt more threatening than the earlier commotion. I was about to retreat back down the steps, when a shadow separated itself from the others, approaching the oak with unnatural speed. I shrank back, heart hammering, but not before catching a glimpse of gray fur and familiar amber eyes. Dominic had returned, but not alone. 3 other wolves flanked him, all massive like he had been in wolf form, but with variations in their coloring. One was nearly black, another reddish-brown, the third a tawny gold. They paused at the entrance, and in the moonlight filtering through the canopy, I watched in breathless amazement as they shifted. The transformation was faster than Dominic's had been at the altar. One moment wolves, the next human forms kneeling on the forest floor, rising with fluid grace. 2 men and a woman now stood with Dominic. The woman had the same tawny coloring as her wolf, her hair falling in golden waves to her waist. The men were as physically imposing as Dominic, the darker one bearing a jagged scar across his chest, the red-haired one younger, with a restless energy that kept him in constant motion. "Can't believe you were captured," the red-haired one was saying as they approached the entrance. 3 days! We thought you were dead." "Lower your voice, Nate," the woman hissed. "We're still too close to the border." "Mira's right," Dominic replied, his tone carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "They could still be tracking us." The dark-haired man, who had remained silent, suddenly stiffened, his nostrils flaring, his gaze fixed directly on the archway where I stood half hidden. "Someone's here," he growled, dropping into a predatory crouch. Before I could retreat, Dominic stepped between the man and the entrance. "Stand down, Ash. She's with me." "She?" Mira's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A human female? Here?" Dominic gestured for me to come forward. With no choice but to obey, I stepped through the archway into full view of the group. The reaction was immediate. Ash straightened but didn't relax, his dark eyes narrowing with suspicion. Nate's mouth actually fell open in shock. Mira circled to Dominic's side, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked quietly. "Why would you bring a human to the sanctuary?" "She freed me," Dominic replied simply. 3 pairs of eyes swung toward me with new intensity. "Impossible," Ash muttered. The chains were spelled. No human could— "She did," Dominic cut him off. "And I've claimed her according to the old laws." This announcement was met with stunned silence, then an explosion of voices. "You can't be serious. A human, as your mate, the council will never accept." Dominic silenced them with a single raised hand. "The council will accept what I decree. But that's a matter for later. Now we need to secure the territory. Whatever Sylvanas is planning, it's already in motion." The name Sylvanas sent a visible ripple of tension through the group. Ash's expression darkened further, while Nate's restless movements stilled completely. "We found traces along the eastern boundary," Mira reported, shifting seamlessly into what seemed like a military briefing. "At least 12 of them crossed over during the last moon cycle. They've been careful to mask their scent, but the rain washed away some of their trail markers. They're establishing a perimeter," Ash added. "Classic encirclement strategy." Dominic nodded grimly, preparing for something bigger. The timing of my capture wasn't coincidental. With me gone and the pack in disarray, they could make their move on the human settlements, Nate finished. "Starting with Blackthorn," I interjected, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. "My village." All 4 shifters turned to me, surprised by my interruption. "Yes," Dominic confirmed after a moment. "Blackthorn sits at a crucial junction between our territories and the human trade routes. If Sylvanas controls it, he controls access to the northern kingdoms," I said, thinking of the merchants who passed through our village during the warmer months. "But why would another wolf pack want human territory?" Mira's expression turned calculating. "She doesn't know." "Know what?" I asked, unease growing at their exchanged glances. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his silver-gray hair. "Sylvanas leads the Iron Fang pack. They're different from us. They believe humans should serve shifters, not live separately." "Serve?" The word felt inadequate for the menace it implied. "They want slaves," Nate clarified bluntly. "Breeding stock, food when it suits them." Horror washed through me, and my village is their first target. "Not if we stop them," Dominic said firmly. "But first, we need to regroup with the main pack. Eleanor comes with us," he added, his tone making it clear this wasn't open for discussion. Ash looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Mira studied me with renewed interest. "She'll need protection, proper clothing, and training if she's to survive among us." "She's stronger than she appears," Dominic replied, his amber gaze meeting mine with unexpected warmth. "But yes, she'll have what she needs." He turned to address the group again. "We leave at dawn. Ash, set wards around the oak. Nate, scout the path ahead. Mira, I need you to send word to Lorcan at the western outpost. Tell him to double the border patrols." They nodded, accepting his commands without question. Ash and Nate disappeared into the shadows of the forest, while Mira lingered, her golden eyes fixed on me. "I hope you understand what you've stepped into, human," she said quietly. "Our world isn't kind to the weak." "Neither is mine," I replied, lifting my chin slightly. "And I have a name. It's Eleanor." A smile flickered across her face. "Very well, Eleanor. See that you survive long enough for us to become properly acquainted." With that parting comment, she shifted forms in a blur of golden light and bounded away into the forest. Dominic watched her go, then turned to me with a wry expression. "Mira's protection is valuable. You've made a good start." "I don't need her protection," I said, my nerves making me defensive. I need answers. This Sylvanus, he's the one who chained you? Yes. Dominic's face hardened. An old rival with new ambitions. He seeks to unite all the shifter packs under his rule, with humans subjugated beneath us. And you oppose this? My pack has maintained peace with human settlements for 3 generations, he replied. We patrol our territories. You stay within yours. The offerings your village sends are symbolic now, a tradition from darker times when the balance was less stable. I processed this information, comparing it against the tales I'd heard all my life. Our elders make it sound like you demand the tributes, that terrible things would happen if we didn't comply. Fear is a powerful motivator, Dominic said, echoing his earlier sentiment. It keeps your people from expanding too deeply into our territories. But we haven't harmed a human from your village in over 70 years. The weight of this revelation settled over me. Generations of fear, of careful boundaries maintained by stories and rituals, all based on a threat that had evolved into something more like a treaty. Come, Dominic said, gesturing toward the archway. We should rest while we can. Tomorrow's journey won't be easy. Back in the underground sanctuary, I found myself restless despite my exhaustion. Dominic moved around the space with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies and weapons into packs, occasionally consulting maps spread across a stone table. Where exactly are we going? I asked, watching him trace routes with his finger. The heart of Shadowvale, he replied without looking up. My pack's main settlement. It's a 3-day journey from here if we travel quickly. 3 days through the forest? The prospect was daunting. And these iron fangs could be hunting us? Possibly. He finally looked up, his expression softening slightly at whatever he saw on my face. You're afraid. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. I've never been more than a few hours' walk from Blackthorn, and now I'm traveling to the heart of the forest that children are warned will kill them if they venture too far. Dominic abandoned his preparations and approached where I sat by the fire. He lowered himself beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You saved my life, he said quietly. I won't let harm come to you. Because I'm your claimed mate, I couldn't keep the edge of bitterness from my voice. A prize taken by ancient law? His brow furrowed. Is that how you see it? How else should I see it? You announced your claim without asking what I wanted. You're taking me deeper into territory I don't know, away from everything familiar. Would you prefer I left you in a village that sacrificed you? He countered, a hint of anger entering his voice. That would shun you now if you returned? No, but the claiming was necessary, he interrupted. Without it, you would have no status among my kind. Any shifter could challenge for you, claim you as their own, or worse. So I'm your property instead of theirs. How comforting, Dominic growled, the sound startlingly reminiscent of his wolf form. You are not property. A mate claim is sacred among our kind, a bond of equals. Equals. I gestured at the space between us. I'm human. You're a shifter king with supernatural strength and who knows what other powers. How is that equal? Power takes many forms, he replied, his voice dropping lower. You showed courage where others would have fled, compassion where others would have turned away. Those are rare qualities in any species. His words caught me off guard. I'd expected justifications or dismissals, not what sounded like genuine respect. I still had no choice in this claiming, I said, though with less heat than before. For that, I apologize, Dominic said, surprising me further. It was instinctive. When you freed me, when I saw you standing there unafraid. He broke off, looking almost confused by his own reaction. Something in me recognized something in you. The sincerity in his voice stirred something unexpected within me. Before I could examine the feeling too closely, Dominic rose abruptly. You should rest, he said, his tone becoming businesslike again. Take the bed. I'll keep watch. I glanced toward the alcove where a large bed piled with furs and woven blankets stood. It looked inviting after the day's events. But shame kept me seated. I've displaced you from your home, forced you to change your plans, I said quietly. The least I can do is take the floor. Dominic's expression softened into something that might have been amusement. I've slept on forest floors for most of my existence, One more night won't harm me. When I still hesitated, he added, "Please, Eleanor. You'll need your strength tomorrow." Too exhausted to argue further, I finally nodded and made my way to the alcove. The bed was as comfortable as it looked, the furs soft against my skin. I expected to lie awake, my mind racing with the day's revelations, but sleep claimed me almost instantly. I dreamed of running through moonlit forests, powerful muscles carrying me effortlessly over fallen logs and streams, of howling with joy as others joined my song, their voices blending with mine in perfect harmony, of amber eyes watching me with emotions too complex to name. When I woke, early morning light filtered down the stone stairway, casting the cavern in a soft glow. Dominic stood by the entrance, his profile sharp against the light, still and watchful as a sentinel. For a moment, I simply observed him, this creature of legend who had claimed me as his mate, who spoke of equality while commanding others with unquestioned authority. As if sensing my gaze, he turned, amber eyes finding mine across the distance. "It's time," he said simply. "The others are waiting." I rose, smoothing my rumpled dress as best I could. I'm not exactly dressed for a 3-day journey through the forest. Dominic gestured to a bundle of clothing laid out on the table. Mira brought these before first light. They should fit well enough. The bundle contained practical garments, leather leggings, a soft tunic of some material I didn't recognize, sturdy boots, and a cloak lined with fur. All were in earthen tones that would blend with the forest. "Thank you," I said, gathering the items. "I'll change quickly." The clothes fit surprisingly well, the material comfortable against my skin despite its strangeness. When I emerged from the alcove, Dominic's gaze traveled over me with unmistakable approval. "Better," he nodded. "You look less like prey now. Is that how your kind sees humans? As prey?" "Some do," he admitted. "The Iron Fangs, certainly. My pack views humans more as neighbors to be respected from a distance." "And now? How do you view me?" The question hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us fully understood yet. Dominic stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. "As a mystery I intend to solve," he finally replied. His hand reached out, fingers grazing my cheek in that same gentle manner that seemed at odds with his formidable presence, and as mine to protect. The possessive declaration should have offended me. Instead, I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest, a sensation both foreign and somehow familiar, like recognizing a place I'd never been before. The moment broke, as howls sounded outside, not the urgent calls of last night, but 3 distinct patterns that seemed almost conversational. "They're ready," Dominic said, dropping his hand. "We should go." As we ascended the stairs together, I cast one last glance at the sanctuary that had been my first glimpse into the world of the shifters. Something told me that whatever lay ahead at the heart of Shadowvale would change me irrevocably, that the Eleanor who eventually returned to this place, if she ever did, would be transformed in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Dominic paused at the archway, looking back at me with those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to my core. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "Trust no one completely, not even those who claim allegiance to me. In the heart of wolf territory, only the strongest survive unchanged." With those ominous words, he stepped through the archway into the morning light, leaving me to follow him into a world where everything I thought I knew about Shadowvale, and myself, would be challenged. The forest transformed in daylight. What had seemed menacing and impenetrable by night now revealed its wild beauty. Ancient trees reaching toward a sky barely visible through their dense canopy, undergrowth carpeted with ferns and wildflowers I'd never seen in the meadows near Blackthorn. Shafts of sunlight pierced the leaves, creating dappled patterns that shifted with each breath of wind. Dominic led our small party at a grueling pace. Mira took position behind me, with Ash and Nate ranging ahead and to our flanks, sometimes visible, sometimes melting into the forest only to reappear moments later. They alternated between human and wolf forms with casual ease, the transitions so swift and fluid they hardly seemed to require thought. "How do you do that?" I asked Dominic during a brief rest by a stream, watching as Nate shifted to wolf form to scout ahead. "The changing. Is it painful?" "Not for those born to it," he replied, filling a water skin from the clear, running water. It's simply returning to another aspect of ourselves. Like breathing, Mira added, settling gracefully on a nearby rock, necessary and natural. I considered this as I drank deeply from the water Dominic offered. The cool liquid soothed my parched throat, but did little for the ache in my muscles. We'd been traveling for hours, and though I prided myself on my stamina from gathering herbs in the hills around Blackthorn, this journey tested my limits. We'll rest properly at nightfall, Dominic said, noticing my fatigue despite my efforts to hide it. The border territory is too exposed for lingering. As we continued our journey, the landscape gradually shifted. The trees grew taller, their trunks wider, the undergrowth denser with plants I'd never encountered. Occasionally, we passed stone markers similar to those that lined the path to the altar, but these bore different symbols, spiraling patterns that seemed to move if I looked at them too long. Territory markers, Dominic explained when he caught me staring at one. They warn trespassers and guide pack members. And keep certain things out, Ash added cryptically, exchanging a significant look with Dominic. By late afternoon, my legs trembled with exhaustion, and even pride couldn't prevent me from stumbling over exposed roots. Without comment, Dominic slowed our pace slightly, and more frequent rest stops were called, ostensibly for the group to check their surroundings, but I suspected the consideration was for me alone. As twilight descended, we reached a small clearing dominated by several massive boulders arranged in a rough circle. Ash immediately began gathering wood for a fire, while Nate disappeared into the trees, returning shortly with 2 rabbits already dressed for cooking. "We camp here," Dominic announced. "It's a safe haven. The stones form a natural ward against detection." Too exhausted to question this, I sank down on a fallen log, stretching my aching legs. Mira approached, offering a small clay jar. "For your muscles," she said. "You'll be no use to anyone if you can't walk tomorrow." The salve smelled of mint and something deeper, earthier. I applied it to my calves, immediate relief spreading through the overworked muscles. "Thank you," I said, surprised by her kindness. Mira shrugged. "Dominic has claimed you. That makes you pack, whether I like it or not." "You don't approve." "It doesn't matter what I approve," she replied pragmatically. "He is Alpha. His word is law." "That sounds like a convenient system for the Alpha." To my surprise, Mira laughed, a bright, musical sound at odds with her usual intensity. "You're not what I expected, human." "Eleanor," I corrected again, "and what did you expect? Someone meeker, more afraid." Her golden eyes assessed me frankly. "Most humans would be broken by now, faced with what you've encountered." "Perhaps I'm still in shock," I suggested, only half joking. Mira's expression grew serious. "That will pass. And when it does, remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's continuing despite it." With those unexpected words of wisdom, she left to help with the camp preparations, leaving me to ponder the complexities of these beings I'd been raised to fear as little more than monsters. The meal was simple, but satisfying. Roasted rabbit, dried berries, and flat bread that Nate produced from his pack. We ate in relative silence, the crackling fire and night sounds of the forest our only accompaniment. After the meal, Dominic beckoned me to join him at the edge of the clearing. The others remained by the fire, giving us privacy while staying within protective range. "You did well today," he said, his deep voice rumbling in the growing darkness. "Most humans couldn't have maintained that pace." "I had motivation," I replied. "Either keep up or be left behind for the Iron Fangs." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You wouldn't have been left behind." The implication was clear. He would have carried me if necessary. The thought sent an unexpected flutter through my stomach that I quickly suppressed. "Tell me about Sylvanus," I said, changing the subject. "What makes him so dangerous?" Dominic's expression darkened. "We were packmates once, long ago. He was like a brother to me, but our visions for our kind diverged. I believe in the old ways, territory, honor, maintaining the balance between our world and yours. Sylvanus embraces a different philosophy, subjugation of humans, and of any shifter pack that opposes him. His iron fangs grow stronger each season, absorbing smaller packs through conquest or coercion. Dominic's hands clenched at his sides. 3 days ago, I went to meet with representatives from the River Clan to discuss an alliance. The meeting was a trap. Sylvanus had turned them, and they helped capture you, I finished, understanding now how such a powerful being could have been subdued. Yes, a betrayal I should have anticipated. Self-recrimination edged his voice. Now my absence has given him the opportunity to move against Blackthorn. Once your village falls, others will follow. But why start with us? We're small, unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Location, Dominic replied simply. Blackthorn sits at the crossroads of 3 ancient ley lines, channels of natural power that run through the earth. Whoever controls that junction gains significant advantage in magical workings. This was entirely new information. Nothing in our village lore mentioned ley lines or magical power, but it explained why generations of my ancestors had settled there, why the village persisted despite harsh conditions and the looming threat of Shadowvale. My grandmother knew, didn't she? I said, fingers finding my pendant again. About all of this. Dominic's gaze fixed on the wolf pendant. I've been wondering about that, may I? He held out his hand. Hesitantly, I removed the necklace and placed it in his palm. He examined it carefully, turning it to catch the distant firelight. This is a royal token, he said finally, his voice hushed with something like wonder. Given only to those under direct protection of the Alpha bloodline. I haven't seen one in decades. How would my grandmother have received such a thing? Dominic returned the pendant to me, his fingers lingering against mine. That is a mystery worth solving. When we reach the heart, there are records we can consult. For now, he gestured toward the fire where the others were preparing for sleep. You should rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. Sleep came surprisingly easily on the forest floor, wrapped in the fur-lined cloak and positioned between the fire and Dominic, who had settled nearby in a protective stance. I drifted off watching the interplay of firelight across his strong features, wondering at the strange turns of fate that had led me here. Morning arrived with misty light filtering through the trees and the aroma of something cooking over the rekindled fire. I sat up to find Mira tending a small pot, the others already alert and preparing to depart. Eat quickly, she advised, passing me a wooden bowl of fragrant porridge sweetened with honey. We need to cross the Silver River before midday. The second day's journey proved as demanding as the first, but my body had begun adapting to the rigorous pace. We traveled through increasingly wild territory, ancient, untouched forest, where the trees grew so large their roots formed natural archways and bridges. Twice we detoured to avoid what Dominic called thin places, areas where the boundary between our world and others had worn dangerously slim. By midday, we reached the Silver River, a waterway that lived up to its name, its surface shimmering like liquid metal under the sun. Unlike the gentle streams near Blackthorn, this river surged with powerful currents, its width intimidating. How do we cross? I asked, eyeing the turbulent water with apprehension. There's a ford half a league downstream, Ash replied, pointing southward, marked by standing stones. As we followed the riverbank, Nate suddenly froze, nose lifting to the air. Smoke, he announced tersely. And blood. The shifters exchanged alarmed glances. Without a word, they melted into the forest, leaving me momentarily alone before Dominic returned to pull me into the shelter of a massive oak. Stay here, he ordered, voice tight with tension. Don't move until I return. What's happening? I whispered, fear climbing my spine at his expression. Trouble at the ford. I need to know if it's Sylvanus. He pressed something cold and metallic into my hand, a small knife with an intricately carved handle. If anyone approaches who isn't one of us, use this. Iron wounds us deeply. Before I could respond, he was gone, shifting mid-stride into his massive wolf form, silver-gray fur disappearing among the shadows. Heart pounding, I pressed back against the oak's rough bark, knife clutched in sweating palms. Minutes stretched like hours as I strained to hear anything beyond the river's constant rush and the forest's ambient sounds. Then came distant snarls and the unmistakable sounds of fighting. Growls, yelps of pain, the crash of bodies through underbrush. I wanted desperately to run, to put distance between myself and whatever conflict had erupted, but Dominic's command held me in place as surely as physical restraints. The forest fell silent again, too silent. Even the birds had ceased their calls. A twig snapped nearby. I raised the knife, muscles tense with fear. "Eleanor." Dominic's voice, rough with exertion. He emerged from the trees in human form, clothing torn and bloody, a fresh gash across his shoulder. "What happened?" I asked, lowering the knife with shaking hands. "Iron Fang scouts," he replied grimly. "They've been tracking us since dawn. We dealt with them, but there will be others." "The others? Are they alive?" "But Ash is injured. We need to move quickly now. The ford isn't safe. Then how do we cross?" Dominic's expression was grim. "There's another way, but you won't like it." He led me back to where Mira tended to Ash, who lay pale and sweating against a boulder, a vicious wound in his side being bound with strips of cloth. Nate stood guard, constantly scanning the forest, his usual cockiness replaced by lethal focus. "We cross here," Dominic announced. "Now." Mira looked up sharply. "Here, the current is too strong for her." "I'll carry her," Dominic replied. "You and Nate help Ash." "And the Sentinels?" Nate questioned, glancing nervously at the water. "We have no choice," Dominic said with finality. "If we don't reach Pack territory by nightfall, we're all dead." I looked from one grim face to another. "What Sentinels?" "River Guardians," Mira explained reluctantly. "Ancient spirits that protect the boundary waters. They don't like trespassers. They especially don't like humans," Nate added bluntly. "Wonderful. More supernatural threats I hadn't been warned about. Can we negotiate with them?" I asked, grasping at possibilities. A strange expression crossed Dominic's face. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "but it would require something significant in exchange." "Like what?" "A blood offering," he replied. "Freely given." I swallowed hard. "My blood?" "Yes. Combined with mine, it might convince them to grant safe passage." His amber eyes held mine steadily. "I won't force this, Eleanor, but without it, our chances of crossing safely, all of us, are slim." The weight of lives, including my own, settled on my shoulders. These shifters who were strangers days ago now represented my only hope of survival, my only allies in a world suddenly grown much larger and more dangerous. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Decision made. Relief flickered across Dominic's features. "Give me your hand." I extended my hand, palm up. Dominic took it gently, producing a small ceremonial knife different from the iron one he'd given me earlier. This blade gleamed with an almost pearlescent sheen. "Bone," he explained, seeing my questioning look. Neutral to both our kinds, with precise movements, he made a shallow cut across my palm. I winced but didn't pull away. He then repeated the action on his own hand and pressed our wounds together. The contact sent a strange warmth up my arm, a tingling sensation that wasn't entirely unpleasant. "Blood of human, blood of wolf," Dominic intoned, his voice deeper than usual, resonating with power, freely mingled, freely offered. "We seek passage across the boundary waters, guardians of the deep. Accept our offering, and grant us safe crossing." He pulled me toward the riverbank, our hands still joined, blood still flowing. At the water's edge, he knelt, bringing me down beside him. Together, we submerged our joined hands in the rushing silver water. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The river's surface rippled outward from our point of contact, concentric circles spreading like a stone thrown into still water, except this water was anything but still. Where the ripples passed, the current calmed, the raging water becoming smooth as glass. A soft glow emanated from beneath the surface, rising slowly until it hovered above the water. A shimmering, vaguely humanoid shape composed of liquid silver. Its features were fluid, constantly shifting, but I could make out eyes like polished river stones fixed upon our joined hands. "Alpha King." The figure's voice flowed like water over stones. Neither male nor female, but somehow both. You bring human blood into our domain. Dangerous, provocative, out of necessity. Dominic replied steadily. The old enemy moves against us both. The iron fangs seek the crossroads. The sentinel's fluid form rippled with what might have been concern. Blackthorn's heart, the nexus point. Yes, I seek to protect it. And this human who saved my life. The sentinel's attention shifted to me, its stone eyes examining me with ancient curiosity. She carries an old mark, royal protection. Interesting. My pendant seemed to grow warm against my skin, though I hadn't mentioned it to the water being. Will you grant us passage? Dominic pressed. Time grows short. The sentinel hovered silently for a long moment, its form undulating with inner currents. Finally it spoke again. The offering is accepted, passage granted, for all in your party. But remember, Alpha King, blood freely given creates bonds not easily broken. Its gaze shifted to me once more. Human child with wolf's token, you walk between worlds now, neither fully one nor other. Choose your path with care. With those cryptic words, the sentinel dissolved back into the river. Where it disappeared, the water remained calm, forming a path of still surface stretching to the opposite bank. Dominic released my hand, wrapping a strip of cloth around my cut palm. We need to move quickly, he said. The passage won't last long. Mira and Nate had already begun helping Ash toward the miraculous pathway across the river. I followed Dominic onto the water's surface, half expecting to plunge through with each step. Instead, it felt like walking on extremely firm jelly, solid enough to support our weight, but with a subtle give that made balance challenging. Don't look down, Dominic advised, taking my elbow to steady me, and don't stop moving. I fixed my gaze on the far shore, trying to ignore the churning current on either side of our narrow path. Halfway across, I felt the surface beneath my feet tremble. The sentinels grow impatient, Mira called from ahead, where she and Nate supported Ash between them. Move faster. We increased our pace, the path now visibly deteriorating behind us. Just as the bank came within jumping distance, the water beneath my feet dissolved completely. I plunged downward with a startled cry, only to be caught around the waist by Dominic, who lunged forward and threw me bodily onto the shore before pulling himself up after me. We landed in an ungraceful heap on the muddy bank, the river returning to its wild state with a roar of triumph, as though irritated at having been temporarily tamed. That, Nate remarked, helping me to my feet, was closer than I'd have liked. I brushed mud from my clothes, trying to regain my composure. Does everything in this forest try to kill visitors? Or is it just me they don't like? A surprised laugh escaped Dominic. The sentinels were actually quite accommodating, all things considered. They could have demanded a much steeper price. Like what? I asked, then immediately regretted the question at his somber expression. A life for a crossing is their usual toll for humans, he said quietly. They've guarded these waters since before my kind walked these lands. The revelation sent a shiver through me. Once again, I'd brushed against death without realizing how close I'd come. We continued our journey with renewed urgency, the encounter with the Iron Fang scouts and the river crossing serving as stark reminders of the danger pursuing us. Ash's condition deteriorated as the day wore on, his normally swarthy complexion growing ashen, the wound in his side seeping despite Mira's ministrations. Iron poisoning, she diagnosed grimly during a brief rest. The blade that struck him was coated with it. Can't you heal him? I asked. The way I helped Dominic with the herbs in the sanctuary? Not here, she replied. We need the healers at the heart. Dominic's expression was grim. We push on through the night. No more rest stops. No one argued. Dominic and Nate fashioned a stretcher for Ash from branches and cloaks, and we resumed our relentless pace through terrain that grew increasingly strange. The trees here were ancient beyond imagining, their massive trunks carved with spiraling symbols similar to those on the boundary stones. Flowers bloomed that should have been impossible, blossoms that glowed with inner light, others that changed color as we passed, some that seemed to follow our movements like curious sentinels. We're entering the inner territories, Dominic explained when he caught me staring at a cluster of flowers that chimed softly, releasing glowing pollen into the air. The heart of Shadowvale has been shaped by our presence for thousands of years. The land and our pack are bonded. Night fell, but our pace never slackened. Dominic produced crystals that glowed with steady blue light, illuminating our path enough to continue safely. My exhaustion reached new depths, every muscle screaming in protest, but the tension in our small group kept me moving forward without complaint. Near midnight, by my estimation, the forest opened into a vast clearing ringed by the largest trees I'd ever seen. Ancient sentinels, whose canopies disappeared into the darkness above. At the center of the clearing stood what at first appeared to be a small mountain, but as we drew closer, revealed itself to be an enormous, partially ruined stone structure. Lights glowed from windows cut into the stone, and figures moved along ramparts carved directly from the rock face. "The heart," Dominic announced, visible relief in his voice. "We've made it." As if his words were a signal, howls erupted from the structure and the surrounding forest. Not threatening, but welcoming. A chorus of voices raised in celebration of their alpha's return. Figures emerged from the stone fortress, shifting between wolf and human form as they raced to meet us. Dominic was immediately surrounded by pack members expressing relief at his return, but he quickly cut through the reunion, ordering medical attention for Ash. I hung back, suddenly acutely aware of my humanity among dozens of shifters, many of whom were regarding me with undisguised curiosity, and some with open suspicion. "Come," Dominic said, materializing at my side and placing a protective hand at the small of my back. "You need rest and food. Tomorrow will bring questions enough." He led me through the gathered pack members, his presence enough to silence any who might have challenged my presence. The structure's interior proved as impressive as its exterior. Soaring ceilings supported by carved stone columns, hallways lit by the same glowing crystals we'd used on our journey, chambers furnished with surprising comfort and artistry. We passed what appeared to be common areas where shifters gathered in both human and wolf forms, all activity pausing as we walked by. Whispers followed in our wake, too low for me to catch but clearly centered on my presence. Finally, Dominic stopped before an ornately carved wooden door. "These are my private quarters," he explained, pushing the door open. "You'll be safe here while I attend to urgent matters." The rooms beyond were spacious and unexpectedly beautiful. Tapestries depicting forest scenes hung on stone walls, their colors vivid and lifelike. Comfortable furniture crafted from wood and leather was arranged around a central fireplace. Arched windows looked out over the clearing, now filled with shifters celebrating their alpha's return. "There's a bathing chamber through there," Dominic indicated a side door. "And clean clothes in the chest. I'll have food brought." He hesitated, something vulnerable briefly crossing his features. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're under my protection here. No one will harm you." Before I could respond, he was gone, the heavy door closing behind him with a sound of finality. Left alone for the first time since our journey began, I sank onto a cushioned bench, the events of the past days crashing over me in waves. I'd gone from village healer to sacrificial offering, to the claimed mate of a shifter king in less than a week. My world had expanded beyond recognition, filled with dangers and wonders I'd never imagined. The bathing chamber proved to be another wonder. A natural hot spring channeled into a stone basin, steam rising invitingly from its crystal-clear depths. I shed my travel-stained clothes and sank into the hot water with a groan of pure pleasure, muscles finally relaxing as heat penetrated deep into tissue and bone. Clean and dressed in the simple but fine garments I'd found in the chest. Soft leggings and a tunic of deep blue fabric that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. I felt almost human again. A knock at the door revealed a young female shifter bearing a tray laden with food. She set it down without meeting my eyes, then hurried away as if afraid I might bite. The irony was not lost on me. I ate ravenously, roasted meat, fresh bread, fruits I didn't recognize but found delicious, and was finishing when Dominic returned, looking weary, but relieved. "Ash will recover," he announced. "Our healers extracted the iron poison." "I'm glad," I said sincerely, having developed a grudging respect for the taciturn shifter during our journey. "What happens now?" Dominic sank into a chair across from me, running a hand through his silver-gray hair. "Now," We prepare. Sylvanus won't stop because we escaped his scouts. If anything, he'll accelerate his plans. For Blackthorn? My village? Yes. We've sent scouts to assess the situation, but I fear we may already be too late to prevent his initial move. Fear clutched at my heart. Despite everything, Blackthorn was still home. Can't you stop him? Not alone. Dominic's amber eyes fixed on mine. The pack is strong, but divided. Some believe we should retreat deeper into Shadowvale, cede the borderlands to Sylvanus, rather than risk open war. And you? I believe some lines must be defended, whatever the cost. His expression hardened. Sylvanus seeks to overturn generations of careful balance between our kinds. If he succeeds, both humans and shifters will suffer. Then we have to stop him, I said, the we slipping out before I could consider its implications. Dominic's eyes warmed slightly. Yes. But first, there's something I need to show you. He led me through torchlit corridors deep into the heart of the stone fortress. We descended stairs worn smooth by generations of feet, finally arriving at a circular chamber lined with shelves bearing ancient scrolls and leather-bound books. At the center stood a large stone table carved with a detailed map of territories I recognized, including Blackthorn and the surrounding region. Our archives, Dominic explained. And this... He selected a particular scroll, handling it with reverence. Might explain how your grandmother came to possess a royal token. He unrolled the brittle parchment carefully on the table. It contained a list of names, dates, and notations in a flowing script I couldn't read. This records all royal tokens granted in the past century, he explained, finger tracing down the list until it stopped near the bottom. Here. 53 years ago, my father granted protection to a human woman named Alara Nightwind. My breath caught. That was my grandmother's name, before she married, before she came to Blackthorn. Dominic's expression grew intent. The record notes she saved the life of a pack member during a border skirmish, and was granted not just protection, but something more. His brow furrowed as he translated the ancient script. Blood debt honor. That's unusual. What does it mean? It means she wasn't just under our protection. She was considered pack friend, almost family. He looked up, amber eyes intense in the torchlight. Eleanor, this changes things. By our oldest laws, the grandchild of a blood debt honoree has status within the pack. You're not just my claimed mate. You have a legitimate place here in your own right. The revelation left me speechless. My grandmother, practical, mysterious, occasionally cryptic grandmother, had secrets deeper than I'd imagined. She'd interacted with shifters, saved one's life, received honor from their king. Had she known all along what lay in Shadowvale? Had she been preparing me, in her way, for this eventual crossing of worlds? There's more, Dominic said, studying the notation further. The pack member she saved was named Lorcan, my father's brother. Your grandmother saved my uncle's life. Which makes us connected, Dominic finished, even before I claimed you. Perhaps that's why. He broke off, looking almost uncertain. Why what? I prompted. Why I felt drawn to you from the moment I shifted back to human form. Why claiming you felt inevitable rather than strategic. His hand reached out to touch my cheek, the gesture becoming familiar now. The old ones speak of recognition. A rare connection between souls that transcends ordinary bonds. The intensity in his amber eyes made my heart beat faster. This powerful being, this alpha king who commanded respect with his mere presence, was looking at me as though I were something precious, something necessary to his existence. Before I could respond to this revelation, hurried footsteps approached the archive chamber. Nate appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Scouts have returned, he reported tersely. Sylvanus has moved. Blackthorn is surrounded. Dominic's expression hardened instantly. Casualties? None yet. They're laying siege, not attacking. Strange behavior for Iron Fangs. They're waiting for something, Dominic concluded, already striding toward the door. Or someone. Call the War Council. In the corridor, he turned to me. This concerns you too. Your knowledge of the village could prove crucial. I nodded, determination replacing uncertainty. Whatever connection existed between us, whatever strange turns had brought me here, none of it would matter if Sylvanus succeeded in his plans for Blackthorn. As we hurried through the fortress toward the council chambers, I touched my grandmother's pendant, feeling its familiar weight against my skin. Perhaps she had known this day would come. Perhaps she had been preparing me all along for a destiny that bridged two worlds. Whatever came next, I would face it not just as Dominic's claimed mate, not just as Eleanor the healer from Blackthorn, but as a woman with her own power, her own choices, her own path to forge between human and shifter realms. The Alpha King might have claimed me, but in the coming battle, I would prove worthy of that claim through my own strength, and perhaps in doing so, find where I truly belonged.